First of all, I'm Dr. Leibman, Education Department here at St. Francis, and this is the first in a series of tapings for cable access television. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderators for tonight. They are the leadership of Kappa Delta Pi. First, Gabby Licata, Christina Hernandez, and Claire Felix. They'll be handling questions from the audience in a little while. And at the front, we have our two moderators, Amanda Innamorato, Vice President of Kappa, and our present President of Kappa, Christina Perez. Okay, guys, all yours.
Okay, so we're just going to give a little introduction to our panelists that we have here today. And we'd like to thank you all for coming out today, to be here today, and just answer our questions that we have. So our first panelist, we have Christina Danielson. She graduated in 2009, and she is currently a principal at Success Academy, Rosedale.
Next, we have Jessica Tancredo. She graduated in 2009. She's currently a guidance counselor and English teacher at All City Leadership Secondary School. Welcome.
Next, we have Robert Greenwich. He graduated in 2010, and he is currently a special education teacher at PS 68.
Next, we have Christina Liberta Cotto. She graduated in 2010. She's currently an 8th grade dean and after-school coordinator at IS 228.
We have George J. Esposito. He graduated in 2012. He's currently a social studies teacher at IS 228.
Next, we have Kevin Feldman. He graduated in 2012. He is currently a physical education and health teacher at PS 971.
Next, we have Carrie Leistman. She graduated in 2014. She's currently a lead math teacher at MS 126.
Next, we have Jamin A. Harris. He graduated in 2014. He is currently an adolescent social studies teacher at MS 108. 180, sorry.
And lastly, we have Michelle Rosenberg. She graduated in 2015, and she is currently an English language arts teacher at MS 8.
Okay, so now we're going to start with some questions. So the first question we have is, why did you choose to go into education? It's open to anyone, and we could have a conversation.
I guess for myself, I've always enjoyed helping people. I've had a lot of teachers that played a positive impact in my life, and I just kind of wanted to do the same. May I add, the election was 2 days ago. This feels like the presidential debate up here, actually. So, but yeah, I want to make a difference and help people for sure.
Anyone else want to add?
I actually didn't go into education right away. I actually was going to go for accounting, and I had a little difficulty my first year in college really debating if that was the way I really wanted to go. And I used to teach dance to younger ladies and little girls when they were younger, and actually one of the girls turned around and said, one of the moms actually said to me that my daughter goes home every day and talks about you and tells me how great of an inspiration you are, and that she wants to be just like you when she grows up. And right then and there, I knew that I needed to change to education, and I needed to work with kids and make a difference in a kid's life.
Great. Do you want to add? Sure.
Okay, so I was actually going to share that education wasn't my actual first major. I had started by taking one social work class and an education class, and the moment that I actually knew that I wanted to become a teacher and that it was the job for me was the moment that I actually walked into a classroom and spent some time with the kids. So yeah.
Would anyone else like to add? Go ahead.
So actually I first majored in elementary ed in 93, And after a semester, I dropped out because I didn't think it was for me. And back in like 2001, I got a job as a janitor at a Catholic school, and I worked there for about 10 years. And seeing what the teachers were doing there and the impact they were making on those children, that was something that I wanted to do. And I found St. Francis, and the rest is history now.
Well, the major reason why I entered education was to make kids' lives miserable. That was the biggest thing. I'm kidding. I'll go back to my sophomore year of high school, where I was going through a little bit of a rough time, and it happened to be my football coach as well as my social studies teacher, and helped me through many situations that I needed guidance with. And going forward in my life, I thought that I want to be what he was to me for other students in that situation. So that's why I chose education.
I chose education basically because my mom's an educator, and growing up, she always mothered me and other kids, and from seeing that, it just inspired me to work with children. She teaches 7th grade, and when I was younger, I would always sit in her classrooms, and I would watch these kids just look at her like she's God. And I kind of wanted that feeling, not to be God, but like just have the kids just look at me like they looked at her. And being in the classroom, you feel that, and that just keeps me going, and I just never want that to stop.
All right, we're going to go on to the next question. Briefly describe your morning preparations for your classroom.
Okay, so I actually like to get to work at least an hour and a half early. I start work at 8:30, so I get there, I want to say 7 o'clock, if not earlier, because I want to be able to reflect on my plans for the day. So oftentimes I go in, I set my classroom up, so that's taking down the chairs, writing your aim or your do now and learning objective on the board. And honestly, I play the waiting game. I like to wait for my students by the door super early, and I always say that that's the moment that I start to get butterflies. And up until this day, even though I'm still a fairly new teacher, I get butterflies every time I see them walking towards my door. But yeah, I get there early. That's my morning routine, and I like to just prepare for them.
Anyone?
So, I have it pretty lucky. I live about 5 minutes away from my school. It's right down the block, so I usually get there about a half hour early, and basically what I do is I just put on music in my room, and I write the flow of the day, and then I just wait for it all to begin again, you know. So that's basically it. I think music mellows me out because I get really hyper once the kids get in the room. So.
I'm gonna answer from a guidance perspective. The difference between being a teacher and a guidance counselor is a teacher, you get to plan your lessons and all that, whereas a guidance counselor, you wait for either a kid to come in and ask a college application question or a kid to come in tears. And so I'd like to, in the morning, get all the paperwork done because that is a really big component of both teaching and counseling. Get that out of the way because the mornings tend to be the quiet time, so that's really nice. But then usually I'll get halfway through and a kid will burst into my office and have something immediate that they need to get done right in that second. But I don't think you can have any routine where you're fully prepared for things because education, I'm sure they can vouch for this, every single day is different. That's one of the beauties of working in a school. And so as much as we can prepare, so many tangible factors go into your daily life. So I like to go in as unprepared as possible and just be ready for whatever a kid has or whatever need they have in that moment, from a guidance perspective anyway.
Being that I'm a dean now, it's a little different. I'm kind of like Jessica, in the sense of like, you don't know what's going to happen. You're kind of walking in. My daily routine is that I need to meet my 8th graders up in the 3rd floor gym, and they meet me up there. And for the first 20 minutes before the bell rings, they come in, they sit down. We kind of let the boys play some basketball to get their energy out before they walk into the class. And then I pretty much make sure the headphones are off, the hoods are down, and, they're all ready to walk in the building and get ready to start. And then once the bell rings, or the few minutes before the bell rings, we let them out, and then I kind of sweep the floors and make sure that all the kids found their classrooms, and that none of the classrooms moved from day to day, and they all found where, 126 is still at 126. So that's just pretty much, and then it all depends on how the day goes and how the kids are and what their reactions are, and if anyone needs help, or if there are any behavior issues, or if they need any support in any way, shape, or form. So my day is never planned. It's pretty much however the kids decide it to be.
And one thing about education that's different than all other jobs is many jobs you go in and your day starts at 8 o'clock. That's when you get there, you clock in. But education's different. You have to be there at least a half hour, 45 minutes early in order to prepare. It's interesting, the teachers that struggle the most are the ones that show up at 7:55 and the day starts at 8. The students pick up on if they're not prepared, if they're just getting there. And if you have that first period class and you're not there and you're not prepared, the student's going to pick up on that. You're going to lose that class for the rest of the year. They'll be gone. So education is a lot different than all other professions because you have to be there. You have to be. You're putting on a show. So you have to be prepared in order to present to that class and get them engaged. If you're not there, if you show up 5 minutes before first period, you're setting yourself up for failure. That's a guarantee.
Well, I beg to differ because I have a first period prep, so I get there 8:10 actually.
Unless you have a first period prep, then you're all right.
So I'm just teasing. I get there about 7:45, but I do have a first period prep. I spend that usually sweeping the candy wrappers off my gym floor for about 20 minutes. And then after that, just go through my equipment, whatever lesson I'm doing for the day, just kind of get prepared. But just to branch off of what he said, I think teachers are kind of to the extent like an actor. You are putting on a show, but you have to be prepared. If you're not prepared, the kids they'll catch on real quick. So you got to be ahead of the curve, so to speak.
Okay, let's go to our next question. This is for our dean and principal on the panel. How many years does it take to become a dean or principal of a school?
I think every situation is different. One of the most important things you want to take into consideration when you move into a leadership role is what are you going to be able to contribute to the community. It's, sometimes people get the impression that once you've moved into a leadership role, sort of you're done learning, but it is in quite fact the exact opposite. As a leader, you want to be a really great model for all of the people in your building, and you want to be able to continue your development and continue your learning as well. Being a leader in a building is a big responsibility because the teacher's development is very much in your hands. The culture and climate of the school building really falls into your lap, and you have to be prepared to be the model for the building and make sure that the building is really moving in a really positive direction. So I think it's also really important for school leaders to have sort of a diverse background and be able to work with different populations within the school. After I graduated from St. Francis, I obtained my master's in special education. So I spent time teaching in a general education class and a special education class before I moved on to get my master's in school administration. So I would say if school leadership is something that you're interested in, you should think about what programs you're looking into after graduation that would further your development and make you sort of more able to work with different populations within your school community.
I agree with her. I graduated from St. Francis and I went straight into teaching math. But I knew from ahead of time, Dr. Leibman and I had many conversations about where was my ultimate goal, and my ultimate goal was eventually to be a leader. Was to get to either a principal or a higher position later on in life. So I knew I had that mentality going in. So once I walked into the building, even as a student teacher, I made sure that my presence was known. I always make sure I volunteered for things. I was always involved, and I got to know my principal and my assistant principals very quickly. So from there, that's how I got my position as my math. So I student taught and then became a math teacher all in the same school within 6 months. So from there, I just built that relationship that I needed to build within the building. And being a dean, you need to have a very good relationship with the kids. So in my classroom, I made sure that like I always had the best relationship. And then I took on the after school coordinator role when it was given to me. And there I was able to definitely show a lot of my leadership skills. And last year, the dean's position opens up, and I took it. I'm in the process of getting my administration degree as well, so that I could eventually keep moving up to get as far as I can. But volunteer for anything and everything. If the principal knows who you are, then that's really what you need. You need to know that the administration knows that you care and that you want to be involved. And once they see that and see the leader in you, that's when they'll start bringing you in. I'm involved in a lot of things that go on in my building, and my principal knows that. So next time that something else comes up, he'll call me before he'll call other people because he knows I'll be there.
Okay. Next question. What are some challenges you faced when you started out teaching?
Looking really young. In all seriousness, that is kind of true, actually. Thank God I can grow a beard. But just kind of getting the respect. People often tend to look down at you and say you're 22 years old. What do you know about teaching? And to their credit, they are kind of right, because you can learn as much as you want in the classroom, but until you actually step foot into a gym or a classroom and there's 30 kids looking at you and it falls on your shoulders, you're like, whoa. So I would just say just kind of getting the respect. And yeah, you are the lowest person at the bottom. But you just kind of take it as a good thing. I would say finding good mentors, role models to kind of model after. And, if they kind of make fun, you just kind of roll with it. And one day you'll be at the top, and then you can make fun of them. So that's how I do it. No, I'm just teasing.
Don't listen to him. Do not make fun of people.
That was a joke. That was a joke.
For me, I think the hardest part about my first year teaching had to be managing my time between working, trying to get my master's, and still wanting to go out and have fun with my friends because I was 22. So I think once you kind of get your priorities in order, definitely make yourself a nice schedule of what you need to do and just stay organized. It got a lot easier.
For me, it was time management, but in the classroom. So for my first year, our periods were 40 minutes long. So as a social studies teacher, we love to run our mouth. We love talking, giving kids all these information, and before you know, when you're ready to get into the group work, period's done. So for me, it was managing that time in the classroom, make sure I hit every point of the lesson plan when I need to. So time management is a big, real big thing. You really got to pay attention to that. And I'll still struggle with time management sometimes. Like I will go on with the work for a little bit too long, and when I get into the independent work, I only got 10 minutes left. So you need to pay attention to time management.
I would say that the biggest thing that I challenged, especially becoming a new teacher, was developing a curriculum. It was especially hard for me because I student taught at a school that used a curriculum that was bought, which had a script. So you were basically told everything that you should say. All of your activities were planned for you. So I went from a situation like that where I had to basically develop everything on my own from the beginning till the end. And again, keeping in mind that buzzword rigor, right? So it's rigor and engagement at the same time, because oftentimes rigor is not so interesting. So trying to keep a balance, keeping the Common Core standards in mind, teaching to the test at times. But again, biggest thing is keeping your students engaged, because if you're not planning for them, then it's basically a loss on your end. So it's 45 minutes of students just staring at you and not really getting into it.
My first year teaching, I think there were 3 challenges. Definitely time management that a few of the other speakers spoke about. The other thing was I was in a really rough school. It no longer exists. It eventually phased out. But not only were the kids sort of a tough population, but the staff, seemed to not really respect the new teachers as much, the older staff, the more veteran staff members. So it was trying to find a way to establish really great relationship with the students, but also with the staff members, and sort of earn your keep, because they look at you just similarly to what one of the other speakers said is, you're 22, what do you know about teaching? Well, it's like, well, help me learn, help me grow, teach me how to be like you, or whatever the case may be. But it's finding that balance of sort of winning over administration, because let's face it, you're not tenured and they can get rid of you at any time. Learning to have a good relationship with the kids, and also finding your niche within the staff. That's important, because those are going to be the people that you go to when you have a rough day, because they understand exactly where you're coming from. They work with some of the same students. They may have some of the same problems with administration. They may have had a bad observation also, and they can be the people you lean on. And then the other thing was, my second year, we found out our school was phasing out. So it was a matter of having to start all over again, and finding a job again, and earning your keep in a new school. So that was my experience.
There were definitely two things that I struggled with my first year. One was classroom management. What I came to realize, and I hear it in my mind going back to my first year, I remember looking at a class, and there were about 4 or 5 of them, and a school rule in our school is there's no gum chewing. And they were chewing gum, sitting there chewing away. They're still chewing gum, right? And in my head, I said, all right, they're just chewing gum. That's okay. And then a cell phone was out. And then there was other things going on. So I struggled with classroom management. I've come to realize that you have to stop what they're doing at the smallest things. So if you stop them from chewing gum, it's not going to exceed to the next problem. They're not going to be throwing chairs, fist fighting, anything like that. So my first year, I didn't realize that, and as I was my 4th year now, I stopped them at chewing gum. I give them a hard time about chewing gum, because that's it. If they think, all right, I'm getting away with chewing gum, I'm sneaking it, it's never going to get to the next level. The second thing I struggled with my first year, I felt like I needed to do everything. I was grading till 1 o'clock, grading every single classwork assignment, grading every single homework assignment, put it all in online, an online grading classroom. No. You have to manage your time. Take out the important assignments and grade those, because if you feel like you're going to do everything, you're never going to accomplish it. I remember I used to have stacks, piles of paper all over my room, and I'm sure our first year, a lot of us could attest to this. We felt like we could do everything. You can't. You have to manage your time. So those were the two things that I struggled with when I was my first year.
I would have to. I would have to say that. I'm not going to lie. I struggled with basically everything when I went in there. I walked out of here graduating thinking that it's going to be a cakewalk, because St. Francis is such a great school, but you really aren't prepared for anything that happens. So I struggled with everything, but then you find your groove. You find what works for you. But I think the biggest challenge before becoming a teacher was finding a school that works for you. I did a lot of subbing in different schools after I graduated, and I did them all around in my neighborhood. And, when you go into that school, you can just tell after working there for a day or another day, this is a school I want to come back to and sub. And I basically said at the school I'm at now, this is a school that I want to retire at. So it's the main key, I think, is finding a school that works for you. Administration may come and go, but the community stays. Most of the time, the staff stays. So I think it's really important to find a school that, you want to go to every day.
I would have to agree with what one of our other speakers said, and classroom management is the thing that I've seen a lot of first-year teachers struggle with the most. And I think part of the reason is because you're coming from a strong education program and you're going into classrooms that are already established, and you're leading 1 or 2 or 3 lessons a day. but the rules, the structures, everything has been established by the teacher that you're working with. And oftentimes first-year teachers sort of misinterpret that as their own success, but it wasn't. It was sort of the systems that were already set up in place for you. So I see a lot of first-year teachers come into the classroom and think that they've done this before and that they know exactly what to do. But they don't realize how many little things that were actually taking place in somebody else's classroom were not just little coincidences that were happening every day. You know, if a child comes in the morning and they're always hungry and crying, it's not a coincidence that the teacher always happened to have an apple. The teacher knew that this child was going to come in upset, and the teacher knew that the child liked apples, so the teacher made it her business to make sure that every night she was preparing and bringing in an apple for this one student. As far as classroom management goes, there are a lot of things that you will not think to put in a lesson plan in regards to simple things like who do we want to call on first? Who do we want to call on second? Where are the children sitting? When do I need to ask my questions? Do I have a timer on the board? Do I have incentives in place? And it sounds like a lot, and the truth is it is a lot. And it really does take time when you're planning your lessons. You want to include aspects of classroom management in your lesson plans because it's really hard to sort of adapt on the fly when you are a first-year teacher and you don't necessarily have an overwhelming amount of tactics in your toolbox. So definitely planning out your classroom management as well as your instructional lessons is equally as important.
Thank you, guys. We have another question. Do you feel like it is hard to give your students the individual attention that they may need due to jam-packed scheduling?
Most definitely, especially as like a social studies teacher in most schools, especially middle school and elementary school, you're not that important. All right, English and math is above you. So your students is getting double periods of math, double periods of social studies. So when they get to you, it's one period, and you have a class of 35, and you're maneuvering to group, but you don't have enough time to really focus on that one student because you got another kid calling you, Mr. Harris, I need help. So you got to spend some time with that kid, bounce to the next one. And then after that period, you don't see him till tomorrow. While in math and English, they got whole 90 minutes to work with them. So personally for me, and I know for like some science teachers, we don't have that opportunity.
I mean, it goes back also to the classroom management piece. Like if you know that you have a lot of kids in the class in a short amount of time, if you put in those different ways of getting the kids to get to you or talk to you or ask you, there's other ways to get them. It doesn't have to be immediate in the classroom. So if they know they can reach you by an email address, if they know you're always available. Nowadays, the Remind app is a big app. If all teachers should look into it, and the kids can kind of contact through this Remind app at any point if they need help with homework or anything. You can have a box in your classroom where they could just put in questions, and it could be anonymous, or they could put their names and you can always get back to them. So sometimes it's not always going to be immediate, and you'll learn what like needs to be fixed or dealt with right away, or what can kind of wait, or maybe everybody has that question and you can kind of address the whole class. But you're never going to have enough time for 30 students in 40 minutes. It's never going to happen. But you can always create ways that the kids always feel comfortable enough to come to you at any point. Lunchtime or any other time that you can make available to them for them to feel that, you know, they can come get an individual help at any point.
I'd have to agree with that. I really don't have trouble getting in, showing attention to all my children because I'm a special ed self-contained teacher, so I'm capped at 12 students max. So that's not necessarily an issue. But last year I was an ESL teacher for 32 kids, and that was challenging. Meeting with all of them, but you figure out a schedule where you can have conferencing with them, and you're not seeing one person all the time. And again, like she said, that you want to let them know that whenever they want, they can come at you, provided it's not during a conference with another kid. But I let them know that my door is always open from 8:05 till 2:20, and it's not even my class; it's any kid in the school. They know they can come and talk to me if they want to. But it's all a matter of making sure that the way you meet with the children, that you don't overlook a certain group or a certain kids, maybe the kids that don't talk. You got to make sure that you schedule time for each of them and that one doesn't get too much attention.
Well, for myself, speaking as a phys ed teacher, K through 5, I have everybody in the whole school. That's upwards of 400 kids. I think that's plays as an advantage and disadvantage. It's advantage because I do know everybody. Such as walking down the hall, people say, "Hey, Mr. Kevin, how you doing?" Other teachers don't have that advantage. They only know is their kids. I think the one thing you have to be realistic in your expectations, that naturally you want to know every student, and you will, but it's going to take time. And the one thing I always do is I try to find, common ground. Like, for example, there's one kid in my kindergarten class who's a handful. And come to find out at his parent-teacher conference last week, his father was a former professional NHL player. And I used that. Like, I'm a hockey fan. Like, hey, Max, I heard you love hockey. You find that common ground, and you can kind of use it to your advantage. So it takes time, but you'll get there. But I think classroom teachers maybe do have it a little easier because they only have 30 as opposed to 400. But especially when it comes to report card time. But that's my experience.
I think one good thing that's worked for me is in the beginning of the year is by starting with icebreakers and activities where you allow the students to tell you who they are outside of their academic piece or outside of the ELA classroom. Also makes them want to come to you for anything. So I think approaching it in a way that makes you always approachable, as he said, allows them to seek you out when they really do need to speak with you. And even for the kids who are quiet, you tell them, well, tell me one thing that makes you different. And that could take 5 minutes in a lesson. It doesn't take very long. Also in ELA, you get the advantage of having kids write about themselves, and so they could reveal it themselves through their writing. But if you allow them to talk about themselves, even if it's on the very first day of school, that opens it up to them saying, hey, Miss Tancredo really cares about me. I'm going to go to her if I really need her. So I think setting that up in the beginning of the year is really important for the kids.
All right. Our next question we have is, today's society is attached to technology. What are some ways to help students love books again?
We are losing touch with real books, and technology is out there now with the Kindles and all that. And our school is trying to be on the forefront of technology and utilizing literacy apps and programs. We have 2 that we use in the school for the children that we schedule during class time, but that they can take home. One is called Mayan, and the other one's called Lexia, and it's basically just takes their interests through questions, and then they have a wide variety of books to choose from, which could never touch like one of our, like my school library in my classroom has not nearly the selection that you would get off this. Thousands of books, and it's based on their interests. So keeping them involved with reading, using these programs that are constantly coming out is really important. And I'm lucky in my school where the principal is constantly looking for that latest program, that latest app. There's also another one out there that we just started using called Newsomatic, which takes current events and makes them kid-friendly from kindergarten up to, I believe, high school. And that's what we're doing in our school for it.
Some of the things we do at Success Academy is the first thing that we do is we make sure that every classroom is fully stocked with libraries. So from kindergarten all the way up, we make sure that there are at least over 500 books for children in each individual classroom. The other piece of it sounds really simple, but seems to get lost at a lot of other places. We just have a really big push to make sure that teachers are developing a love for reading in their classrooms. We do a lot to make sure that the literature we use in our curriculum is high quality children's literature. that really captures the joy of reading. And teachers make sure that the reading time in their classroom is sacred, that it's a special time, and that children understand the value of it. We give our third and fourth graders just 60 minutes within their school day just to independently read. And we really hold that time sacred in our school schedule, because we want to make sure that we sort of put our money where our mouth is as a school. And we want to make sure that if we're telling children one of the most valuable things they can do is read, that we're giving them time to do so in school. We also make sure that their book shopping experience in their classroom library is a really joyful experience. We make sure that they're picking a decent amount of fiction and nonfiction so that they have full access to different genres throughout the library. And the teachers facilitate really nice book discussions that are scholar-led, where children get to bring the books that they're reading from their book baggies and just discuss what's happening in their books. And we also make sure that the other literacy components throughout our schedule really focus on a love for reading. At Success Academy, one of our biggest things is that if a kid can learn to read and love to read, they can teach themselves anything. And one of the things that we really want to teach our kids how to do is how to become self-motivated learners. So we really use our literature to make sure that we're fostering that in the children.
Anyone else?
Okay.
This will be the last question, and then we'll go on to the audience questions that we have gotten before.
What are some roadblocks that have come up with differentiating instruction in your classroom?
Well, understanding the difference between differentiating and scaffolding, and really knowing your students. So also the materials. So like you have to make sure that you know your students. If you do not know your students and you're not constantly assessing them, you're not going to be able to differentiate or scaffold for them. And it kind of all ties back to the same piece of classroom management. So like there are kids who need to be challenged, and there are kids who need to be taught on a lower level, and they're all going to be present in your classroom, levels 1s all the way to level 4s. And even if their state test scores say a certain number, kids are always different and always changing, and every topic within the classroom is always changing. And being able to differentiate for them is going to be the best thing that's going to keep your classroom going. And people, I think, make it much harder than it actually is, but just simply putting a hint on a piece of paper is differentiating for a student. Being able to underline a word that they may need to know, or take a word problem and bullet it, is something as easy as differentiating. And I think the word differentiation scares a lot of teachers, and it's really not as hard as everybody thinks it is. And if you just take the time to see what, like something as small as larger prints, or giving a kid a calculator, and if you don't normally give calculators, or just simple little tools that would help the student just achieve better in your classroom, is going to make a world of difference.
And to tap on what she said, how you want to challenge the higher students and make it accessible to the younger ones. I always try to make the lower ones. I try to make it challenging for them as well, while differentiating. And the roadblock is how I differentiate and not making them discouraged, because I don't want to make it too difficult for them. But at the same time, I don't want to just give them everything. I want to make them feel that they're working for something. So it's very easy, in my case, being in a special ed, it's very easy for these kids to get discouraged. So I'm always trying to support them and trying to make it challenging for them, but at the same time making it as accessible to them as possible.
When I hold interviews with teachers, especially younger teachers, I ask a lot of special education questions during the interview process. And the one thing that I'm listening really closely for in regards to special education or differentiation is I want to get a good pulse on what the teachers' philosophies around this really are. And you'd be surprised to see how many teachers, when talking about special education or differentiation, are really quick to label kids and just say that, if kids have IEPs, they're unable to perform, so I change the work to make it something that they can do. something that you want to keep in mind about differentiation is the reason that you're doing it is because the way that you're going to present it to the rest of the class is not going to allow that particular child to learn that particular lesson. Doesn't mean that the child is not capable of learning it. It just means you have to sort of navigate a different system, and it's your responsibility to ultimately get them to achieve the end goal. So you want to really keep that in mind and make sure that when you're on interviews, you're able to really highlight what your philosophies are on special education, because I think a lot of school administrators want to know that you believe that all children are capable of learning to the standards that are set for them, and that it's your responsibility as an educator to make sure that you are creating a path that's going to ultimately allow that child to achieve.
I think one of the difficult things about differentiation is that there's 1,000 ways to differentiate, and it's tough for a teacher to understand which ones that you have to do. You feel like you have to differentiate everything in one lesson. So when I'm differentiating, and I find myself with this problem all the time, is there are 3 ways you can differentiate, and this is the way I think. How the content, how they're receiving the information. You could do a video for certain students that are visual learners, something kinesthetic for kinesthetic learners. And then another way is the process, how they're creating something. Giving them vocabulary, front-loading vocabulary. That's a great differentiation tool for how they, the process of the assignment. And then the product, what they do at the end of the assignment. You could have some students creating a brochure. You could have some students write an essay, depending on what their learning levels are. So you don't have to differentiate every single thing all the time. You could differentiate content, how they're doing it, and the actual product that they create. So don't get overwhelmed because everybody says, you got to differentiate like this, you got to differentiate like this. Step back, and the way I think about it is, all right, if I'm doing differentiation through content, I'm showing a video today for certain students that need that video to understand the material. That's what my differentiation focus is today. And then the next day, I'm going to differentiate the process of how they're doing it, and then the next day, the product. So don't overwhelm yourself with differentiation. At least I try not to, but it's always difficult.
I think just to branch off of what he said is it all comes back to knowing your kids. Every kid has a different, learning style, learning ability. If you don't know your kids, then it ain't going to matter. I'll be honest, it's my 5th year teaching. I just figured out differentiation this year, actually. Meaning that this is my 3rd school that I've taught at, and every school is a different environment. All my students are ESL kids. A lot of them do not speak the language, which kind of was weird to me this year. I'm like, I don't get it. But now I finally realized that's who they are. I have to adapt my teaching to their learning style. So I rely heavily on visuals. It's not a one size, fits all. It's different for each experience. But just to branch, it really comes back to taking the time to know who your kids are. Once you know their strengths, their weaknesses, then you can kind of, find a game plan that works for you.
I don't want to repeat what everyone just said. So the one thing that I really want you guys to keep in mind as you embark on your teaching careers, UDL, and I have to thank Dr. G for sharing that with us, but universal design for learning touches on basically everything that everyone said up here, and it's going to be your best friend because it presents a philosophy for both teaching and making sure that you're accessing or providing an access point for all of your students.
When I think of differentiation, I think of 3 things: student-led, choice, and flexibility. So student-led, meaning those of you who aren't familiar with that buzzword, it's you do less talking and you make the kids do the talking or whatever it is that's been going on in the lesson that day. When the students sort of are more involved in the lesson and you're sitting back observing them, you get to see what they know and what they don't know. And also sometimes they learn best from each other than they can even from you. So a class where, like, I had a debate today in class. I asked one question. I didn't know it was going to turn into a debate, but it wound up turning into a debate, and it was one of the best lessons I had all year. So that goes with flexibility. If you're the kind of teacher who's like, I have to follow everything I planned out for my lesson plan, and you're not that flexible person, then you're missing out on some really great opportunities for kids to learn, show you what they know, and for kids to learn from one another. And also one of the things George was speaking about, student choice. So a lot of assessments in the day when we went to school was, okay, this is your project, you have to write this essay on this specific topic and do this. But when you do your formal assessments, if you give a student a choice of doing like a brochure or writing an essay or doing an advertisement or whatever it is that you're assessing, and giving them that choice to show what they know in a different format, I think that's when you really get to differentiate and also have the kids display their knowledge in a way that they're most comfortable with. That's it.
All right, we'll move on to our other moderators now. Let's go to Gabby, and we'll start the questions that we've collected earlier from the audience.
Okay, so the first question is, as a teacher, how have you handled the recent results of the election with the students? It's just...
Well, like I have a bridge class this year, which is 2 grades in one. So I'm doing a first and second grade class, and there's a couple of ESL kids in there. And one kid walked in saying that he was so mad that Trump was president now, and another kid said, my mother said he's mean. Another one said he wants everybody that doesn't speak English out of the country. And my main goal was not to bring up what he said or anything like that. It was Hillary and Trump want the same outcome for the country. It's just how they go about getting there. And I spoke to them about compromise, and then I spoke to them about how important it is that the citizens, aside from the government, but the citizens need to work together to get through this. And they actually walked out with a more positive view of the election outcome, and I thought that was a good thing.
So all week, well, the last 2 days, I've been asked this question nonstop by students about the election. You have to know the role that you are in the students' lives. You are bigger than life. They come in every day, they see you. So anything that you say is going to affect them in one way or another. So you cannot say that I'm not accepting as a teacher the election results. I'll give you a quick example. There was a teacher in my school, and at the end of the primaries, they were talking negatively about Trump in front of their class. Happened to be one of those students, had a parent that was very Republican and supported Trump, went home and told their parents. The parents called the school, and all hell broke loose. Those parents, indoctrination was getting thrown around. You got to stay neutral. They repeat everything you say at home, at least most of them. So stay as neutral as possible, because they will go home and tell their parents. And also for them, you don't want your views to be forced onto them, so you really have to stay neutral. And as a teacher, you're going to face this all the time when it comes to political views, anything, especially a social studies. I know there's another social studies teacher, and I'm sure he was asked this a lot this week as well. So stay as neutral as possible. That's my best advice.
You can go ahead.
All right. I agree with him completely. You have to remain neutral. It's very tough because you have kids who they express your view, and you can't show agreement with them. You just have to remain neutral. And I had my 7th graders and my 8th graders come to me yesterday complaining. Some of them were crying, and it's rough because you just have to encourage them. You got to just preach to them that you just have to remain together. You got to just show this unity. And if you believe in democracy, if you believe that you can, because after what they've seen, they didn't believe in democracy after that. So you have to reinforce it to them. And if they want to see change, that they are going to be the future. So you got to be that change. So you just have to reinforce that in them. But like he said, you have to remain neutral. It's really, really important, because if you show a view, if you pick a side, you're going to put that impression on them. They look to you. They take your word as everything. So you really have to remain neutral.
One thing, let's not forget, you could get reprimanded by an assistant principal if a parent's calling up and parents are calling up complaining that you are saying certain things to students. So just keep that in mind when you have to handle these social and political issues in class.
Okay, we'll go on to the next question. Christina?
What do you personally find most rewarding in being a teacher and the connection you make with your students?
So I've been lucky enough for the past 3 years to have followed my students from 6th grade, 7th grade, all the way through to 8th grade math. And I think for me, having kids who came in 6th grade and couldn't even divide decimals, going out in 8th grade and getting 90s on their Algebra 1 regents, it blows my mind. Not to mention the relationships that I've built with them. 3 years with the same students is a long time. I might know them better than they want me to, more than I probably want to. But I still have kids who graduated 3 years ago emailing me, "Miss, can you help me with this geometry problem?" Like, you don't have anyone else? Yeah, of course. But it's just, they still think of you. Like the same way we still think of Dr. Lyman and Dr. G, we want to come back here. That's how you want your kids to feel. And it feels so amazing when you know that they do.
Yeah, I would just say the trust factor. Like I said, everything takes time, but you will find as time goes on that they'll come to you, they'll open up to you for good reasons and not so good reasons. And I've had the experience being on both ends. Christmas gifts are always nice, I'm not going to lie. But just really seeing them grow, seeing them mature and opening up to you, and it's a positive thing for sure.
Definitely teaching siblings is also an amazing thing. I mean, I taught ESL math for many years, and it's funny how you get one sibling in, and then as they go and over the years, I've now taught 4 siblings in one family. And now the little sister's in the building also, and she always comes. She's never met me, but because I had her brothers, she comes to visit me every day. And it's nice to see the impact that you make on the kids. Like, honestly, my first class that I ever taught are sophomores in college. And it's incredible. It could be one of you guys sitting in front of me, and I taught you in 6th grade, like 6 years ago. It's incredible to see how much they've grown, and how when the parents come back and they talk to you about it, or even when the kids show up. At David A. Booty, we have a lot of kids standing outside that are graduates every day at 2:20. And now being the dean, that was my biggest scare when I first became the dean, that I'm not in the classroom with the kids anymore. Like, I thought I was going to lose that relationship with the kids and not get to have that relationship anymore. But it's different. You build different relationships, but the kids still know who you are, and they know to come to your office. And those are the relationships you're going to cherish forever, especially when they come back from high school or college and they show that they've grown so much, and it's because of you. And I actually have a funny story. One of the teachers in my building, her babysitter is actually a former student of mine. And she took him on a college tour, and she was asking him, who's your favorite teacher, when you were at Booty? And he's like, Miss Liberta. Miss Liberta was my favorite teacher. She sat with me. I didn't know any English, and she made sure that she taught me all the math that she possibly can and would never leave my side until I knew it. But the kids now graduated 3 years ago. So for them to still remember these things and remember who you are, and that you made a difference in their life, that's the best feeling in the world.
All right, we'll go to the next question.
Our next question is, how did you feel on the first day of school when you first began teaching?
I'll take a stab at this. I walked in, I had about 40 sixth graders looking at me. My first mindset was, what are you looking at? And then about 5 seconds later, I realized, wow, I'm in charge. Yeah, it's overwhelming, because in a good way and a bad way. You'll learn so much about being a teacher here at school, but you don't learn. It's on the job training. Once you get there, that's where you get the most experience. And I've only been teaching for almost 5 years, and I look back and I'm like, wow, if I only can do that. My first day, you'll never forget it. But it's a little scared. I think we all could agree. But then you find your way as time goes on, for sure.
Like he said, you get your butterflies in your stomach. And I remember my first time working in front of my kids. I had female students who were taller than me. I looked like them. I barely had any facial hair. I still don't have any facial hair. But it was a moment you will never forget. It's just like I'm just reminiscing right now. My voice cracked when I talked to them. It was just, it's a moment, and it will always be in your heart and your mind. You'll always remember it. And like no matter how many years, this is my 3rd year teaching. The first day of school is nothing like it. You still get nervous because another group of kids walking in. So like every year, that first day is like starting all over again. So it'll be like your first year, but you know what to do. But it'll just be like repetition. It's all brand new again. So you're gonna cherish your first day. Just always remember it. And it's gonna ignite that flame that's gonna keep burning, and you just don't want it to go out. Just remember it, cherish it, laugh at it. So when you get like me, you can look back at it and just have a good time thinking about it.
I cried for a year. I don't know. I'm happy you guys had a great time. But there was a point where I was like, I can't do this. I cannot go back to work. I'm good. I'll go back to school. I've only been out for 6 months. I have time to learn something new. It's really scary. It's fun now. I love going to work. But for that first year, I thought I was doing everything wrong. Actually, it was my 3rd year teaching. I still had the same assistant principal, and we got into some type of discussion. He was like, oh, remember 2 years ago? But I was like, yeah. I was like, that was my first year teaching. And he was like, there's no way that was your first year teaching. I was like, I used to go home and cry every single day. He was like, I would never have known. So as long as you keep a code switch really well and don't let anyone know that you're miserable, it won't be that bad. It's the truth.
I think the first year is all about survival. If you do feel like crying, it's totally normal, and June will come at some point or another.
I actually didn't start off my first year, the first day of school. I actually was called in like a week into school started, and I actually had 2 6th grade classes and an 8th grade class. And when I walked into my 8th grade class, all the kids were all taller than me. And the first thing I asked them to do was sit down so that I could be taller than them. That was my biggest thing. It's rough, but even this year being the dean, now this is my first year being the dean, and that was very intimidating. I have to tell you that, like walking into, and I dean 550 kids. So it's me against them, and it's the largest class we've ever had on the 8th grade. And usually the 8th grade are known to like walk around the halls, and they get scary by 8th grade. And I have to say, like, as scared as I was, I made sure that they didn't know it, but it's been a great experience so far, being that's only been 2 months into school. But as scared as you are, you have to make sure the kids know that you're there for them, and that's all that matters, that you're there for their education and their well-being. And if they know that, then it doesn't matter how bad the rest of it goes.
Just a quick tip for your first year: find yourself a good mentor teacher or buddy teacher. Like for me, I had this teacher named Ms. Stewart, and like after a rough day, I could go in her room and vent. That's one thing you're gonna do a lot as a teacher. You're gonna vent to other teachers, but you want to find that good teacher who you can talk to, bounce some ideas off of, bounce your frustration off of, and she can help you out, or he can help you out. It's because it's gonna help you during that year. There's gonna be a lot of times you're gonna feel like you're gonna quit, and that veteran teacher is gonna keep you in the mindset to keep going, and you need that. Trust me, you need that. All right, that's gonna be a sit-down moment. You're really going to need that. If you don't get that, then there's going to be a lot of frustration. All right? So make sure you find a buddy teacher, a good mentor who can help you along the way.
Just to add on that, do not confuse venting with other teachers to office politics, because that will get back to you. So I would just say be kind of wary of who you trust. I don't mean that in a bad way, but from my experience, nothing bad happened, but just watch who you talk to.
I had the advantage of going into my first school, of knowing sort of what I was getting myself into, actually. Thanks to Dr. Leibman, I got hired during a hiring freeze. And he called me and said, I need you to go on this interview because this is going to be how you get a job. And I was like, okay, what does that mean exactly? He's like, well, I have a principal who contacted me, and basically these teachers are running out of the building because the kids are tough, and you're one of the toughest people I know. And I said, okay. So I went and I got the job, thankfully, and I looked at the kids and I similar to Liberta's experience was I saw these kids and like, all right, everyone's bigger than me, so I can only be so tough at 100 pounds and 23 years old, especially when I look like their age. So I asked the kids my first day, I said, listen, you've already ran 5 teachers before me out of the building, so I'm not going to try and be the toughest person in the world because that might not work, and I'm not very scary. So what do you need from me, for me to be able to stay here and for you to actually learn and earn your credits so you can graduate, because it was high school. And they told me what they needed from a teacher. And so I tried my best. I think I succeeded. I still talk to a lot of those kids 7 years later. I asked them what they needed from me so that they wouldn't give me the hardest time in the world. And I actually had a lot of success with that. And it's all thanks to Dr. Lyman.
Sorry.
No.
An interesting, question then to follow up from the one that we just asked, because everybody just sort of shared some of their favorite teaching moments. And I think while those moments are precious and they will happen, it's really important to know that they're not going to happen to you on the first day of school. The first day of school, you need to go in for extremely prepared and extremely planned. Like we were talking about before, all of the things that you see in the classrooms that you students teach, they're not accidents. They're conscious decisions that the teachers made from day one. So, in a lesson plan on day one, you might say, if you're teaching kindergarten, first grade, second grade, we want to have like a share circle and we want to talk about what happened over summer vacation so the kids get to know each other. Great. How are you going to give directions to get from the desk to the rug? Who's going to sit next to who on the rug? Do you know who are friends? Do you know who have had issues in the years prior? What are you going to do if a kid starts crying? What are you going to do if a kid pees their pants? What are you going to do if a kid throws up? And it sounds like a lot of things to plan for, but the truth is you have to have a plan for all of those things, because the teachers that I have seen be wildly successful are teachers that come in with very strong plans to say, if this happens, this is how I handle it. If this happens, this is exactly what I'm going to do. They script out their directions. They script out their lessons. They script out things that they want to say. And that seems like a very intense amount of planning. And I'm sure that when you're in, your 5th year, you're not really going into the first day of school with that level of plan because you're prepared to handle the things that are coming at you. But as a first year teacher, you're a lot less prepared than you think you are. And the more things you have in front of you, the more plans you have, the more thinking you put into it, that will allow you to have those really precious moments with the kids throughout the year.
And don't be afraid to ask for help. I remember my first year I was getting very overwhelmed, and I had a feeling my first observation was coming, and I didn't think I was doing the right thing. So what I did was we work with the organization Teaching Matters, a nonprofit, and they bring people in to help teachers with instruction and other things. I went to one of the people from Teaching Matters, and I said, I want you to come in and pretend you're doing a Danielson observation, a real formal observation. I want ineffectives, I'm getting ineffectives. I want developings, I'm getting developings. They came in, I remember my observation form I got back. Now remember, this is not a real observation. Developings with 2 ineffectives, with a bunch of instructions on how to improve. So over the course of the next 3-4 weeks, I tried to make as many adjustments as possible, and my first observation, I got all effectives. So don't be afraid to ask for help, because if I didn't step up at that point and ask for help, my first observation would have been pitiful, horrible, and I would have went home and cried. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Schools have systems where they're in place to help teachers, but sometimes if you're having problems, we're lucky to have an amazing principal, probably one of the best in New York City, who helps us with these problems. So ask for help, and hopefully there's somebody in the school that will help you.
I just wanted to piggyback off of the note that you should obviously be prepared, but I was also thinking back on my first year, which was last year, and I actually started substituting, so I took the place of a maternity leave. Beyond being prepared, I feel like you definitely need to be flexible. By being flexible, you allow for moments for your students to actually get to know you as like a human being, and essentially that allows you to build relationships with them. So yes, being rigid to some extent is good, but also allowing yourself to be open to things changing?
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's a lot of teachers that know everything about a certain content, but if you can't relate to people, it's pointless. It all goes back to knowing your kids. So I would agree for sure.
All right, Gab, the next question.
Okay, this is for it's directed for the phys ed teacher, but you can branch out to everyone else. How do you keep lesson plans new and exciting for yourself and for the students throughout the years of teaching?
That's a good question. Thankfully, I will say, working for the Department of Ed, there is an office called the Office of School Wellness Programs, and they offer a lot of professional development for that reason on basically how to make your classes better, gives you more ideas. Unfortunately for me, and I think this happens a lot in New York City schools, I don't really have a traditional gym. I have like a multi-purpose room. When I got the job last year, I went in and I was like, how am I supposed to teach in here? But a year later, you really realize what you can and cannot do. Like for myself, I'm my own worst enemy because I expect to have everything done the way that I want it to. And I'm starting to realize as time goes on, if I can't get to it, it's not the end of the world. I'll get it to the next day. But in teaching, you're always learning. You have to adapt. If you go in thinking you know all the answers and I'm the best person ever, then you might as well just walk out and leave, because you're not. And I know that, and that's okay. So I read a lot of books. I talk to a lot of people. Some people at my job tell me I talk too much. But I'm always talking to people, because you talk to people, you realize, hey, what do they do? What you see people, I'm not going to do that. So it's being open to new ideas and just taking it to you as it comes, I guess. I hope that answers your question. My pleasure. Thank you.
Is there anything specific you remember you learned in an SFC education class that has stuck with you and was useful?
Dr. Leibman's methods class, for sure. Yeah, that's the one where you teach your first lesson, and I look back, and I was horrible back then, actually.
Best class ever.
And yeah, that's okay. It's a good thing, I guess.
I was going to say what you were going to say. Jamin always brings this up, but I was going to say this is something that Dr. Lyman always has told us, and I'm sure he's told you at some point, or he's going to tell you this, but the kids are not going to remember what you taught them. They're not going to remember the lesson for that day, the lesson a week ago, the entire unit, but what they will remember is how you made them feel.
That's it. 100% true.
We got to give Dr. G some love here. So,
I know.
I remember when I graduated, that was one of the first years Common Core wasn't even fully implemented yet. It was just starting to get implemented. And Dr. G was kind of learning with the city. And the way he broke down how to look at these very complex standards, and this might sound educational, but into nouns, verbs, and really look at the standards and how to implement them in the classroom, that really helped me. Because that's reality. You got to use the Common Core in your classroom. Agree with it, disagree with it, that's what they ask. So I think that I remember how he broke down those standards and taught us how to break down those standards and implement them in the classroom. That's something that really helped me get be teaching for 4 years. So definitely.
I think also just the support that between Dr. G, Dr. Leibman, and all the other staff in the office always gives now when you are in school and even when you're out of school. So even till this day, I can call anyone up or even come visit, and just knowing that they're still there, bringing that to your classroom and knowing that that's what you've learned, that you always will have people here at St. Francis to help you, that if you take those same things that you learned from here there, that you'll just be just as successful as this program has been for us. That's why, like, we always come back to talk at the graduate panels, because Dr. Leibman or Dr. Giaquinto, in a snap of a finger, if you need something, can get something done for you. So that's why you come back to give all the love and care to you guys and show you guys how to be the best teachers that you guys could possibly be, because that's where we learned. We learned from them.
Just to add something briefly, Dr. Giaquinto and Dr. Lyman, they are in your corner. I'm sure you guys could probably attest to that, but I don't speak every day, but I know if I need something from him, I can call him. And he can make a call on your behalf. So keep these guys in your corner, for sure. Absolutely.
Keep the entire education department in your corner.
I would just have to say that after hearing the question, the things that popped into my head was classes with Dr. Gare and Dr. G. They gave us the opportunity to be as creative and as open as possible, because that's what you need to do as a teacher. You need to think openly, you need to be as creative as you can. And then when it came to Dr. Leibman, I only had a couple of classes with him at the end of the program, but I'm just thinking about how he took that daunting task of the portfolio that we had to put together, and he made it as painless as possible. And that stands out for me, is that, something as big as that took so long to make, and how thick it was and all this other stuff. He didn't make it as big of a problem as you would think it would be. And then, like the other panelists have said, we take what they have given us and we bring it to the students now. So it's really important. Thank you, guys.
All right, we'll go on to our last question.
What are some things that we can do to have a good student teaching experience?
So if anybody knows, Carrie was actually my student teacher when she came to IS 228. She actually student taught at my school. And I've actually now hosted, before I became the dean, I think I want to say 4 or 5 student teachers, not just from St. Francis, but from all different schools over the last 6 years. And the biggest thing is to hopefully get a very good cooperating teacher. And unfortunately, not every time that's going to happen. So it's making the best experience that you possibly can with the cooperating teacher that you have. And if it's not working for you, you need to speak up, because that is going to be the experience that really teaches you to be as possibly prepared as you possibly can be for your first year as a teacher. And that is pretty much where you're going to learn how to become a teacher. As much as we want to sit in the classrooms and come here to St. Francis and everything and teach the classes that we want to teach in Dr. Leiben's class or Dr. G's class, but you really do not face the truth until you're in front of those students. And that cooperating teacher is going to be your backbone to hopefully teach you the correct way, so that you can become at least the best teacher that you could possibly be and really experience and learn what it's like to be in a classroom.
I was very lucky to have an excellent student teacher, and I attribute that to the placement that Dr. Leibman puts us in. The schools that he picks, places that you go, and like I said, I had a really good experience, and she's become a friend of mine, and I just made myself open to her. Whatever she wanted me to do, I would do. She gave me a lot of freedom to do what I wanted in the classroom. And I was just listening to everything she had to say. And I still take a lot of that stuff that I learned from her in my classroom today.
And I've had a couple of student teachers from St. Francis. And I'm going to take for granted that you're all hard workers. But the one thing I would recommend, show up on time, be professional, don't get involved in any drama. Schools have drama, just like any workplace. Mm-hmm. Don't get involved in any drama, and be as professional as possible. Okay? Work ethic, if you have that, just stay out of all the other nonsense. That would be my best recommendation.
To add to that, I would say just walk in, letting go of all of your inhibitions, be prepared to get your hands dirty, as well as being a sponge, right? You want to take all of it in, because at the end of the day, your or your cooperating teacher ends up becoming a resource for you, possibly your colleague or someone that you can possibly look back on or refer to if you ever need additional help.
From my experience, I would say your student teaching kind of is like a job interview, because when I was finished, I was asked by the principal to come back and sub. I subbed for almost about 3 years before I got my break. So you may think people are not watching you, but they are. So just, you go in with an open mind. Fortunately for me, I did have a good cooperating teacher. At first, I did not like him. But to this day, he's actually one of my best friends. We still keep in touch. And, they know a lot more than you. This guy's been teaching for 28 years. That's as long as I've been alive. So he knows what he's doing, or she for that matter. And I would say don't only, for myself, I'm a phys ed teacher, but that does not mean I only talk to him. Talk to everybody, because if you get your foot in the door, that's how you're going to sub. If you talk to the kindergarten teacher, she may know somebody who knows somebody. And a lot of it is true. A lot of it kind of who you know to an extent. So gain as much experience as you can. You're there to learn. Don't go in thinking you know everything, because you do not. So make the most of it for sure. And get on the secretary's good side. She will help you. Trust me. When those substitute calls come at 5 in the morning, she's going to be the first one to call you. So get on her good side for sure.
Just to piggyback off of what he just said, when you're student teaching, it's easy to cling on to the teacher who you're assigned to. But I learned the most I student taught in my alma mater, my high school I went to, and so I thought, well, the person who I wound up student teaching with was the department chair. And he was very busy. And so there were a lot of times where I was in the office looking around, waiting around, and for him to come back so I could pick his brain. But eventually I was like, you know what, I know this building. I'm going to go everywhere and speak with everybody. And especially if it's a school you want to wind up working in, really networking with or just going around and speaking to people in all of the offices, all of the different classrooms, the different subject areas. It's also a learning experience for you, not just for learning how to teach, but also learning what you want in a school. So it's important to sort of not just stay in that one classroom or that one office with that one person in the school, but go around and see what that school is all about, because I thought I wanted to teach there, and then I wound up realizing that I wanted to be in a smaller school because I like that camaraderie and I like knowing everyone in the building's name. And I didn't learn that until I started student teaching. So I think the takeaway is to not just be with that one teacher that you're assigned to really see the school for what it is outside of the classroom that you're in and doing your hours in.
May I just add one thing real quick, if you don't mind? I heard this a lot when I was doing my student teaching from Dr. Lyman, and it's very true. Get your certifications out of the way, because the worst thing that can happen is whether it's your student teaching experience or when you're finished, somebody knows somebody who can offer you a job, but you can't take it because you're not certified. That's the worst experience. I never had it. I wasn't certified when I did my student teaching. I had my back against the wall. I did get it, but I didn't sleep very well at night until I got it. So it is true, and he will get on your case about that. But to make your life as less stress-free, get them out of the way. And I think everyone on the stage could probably agree with that. So.
Yeah. And also, this is the first time you're probably going to be in front of children where you're getting feedback from somebody that works in the school. So it's really important that when you're receiving feedback from the teacher that's supervising you, that you're really receptive to the feedback, and that the teacher sees that you are really open to it and that you're willing to implement the feedback really quickly, because you want to keep in mind that you don't really know the dynamic of the school. So the teacher could be working really closely with the administration, and you want to make sure that your cooperating teacher says positive things about you to the administration. And something that's really important to school administrators is that the staff they have in the building are willing to accept feedback and willing to implement it very quickly.
How about a round of applause for these great educators?